So, we were talking about ergonomic hazards. So, ergonomic hazards have three different types. We have the physical ergonomic hazards that includes the poor work, task design, repetitive work, doing one particular work, in the same way several times, prolonged sitting, sitting for a long time, poor layout, poor posture. That is the position, your position while carrying out a particular task. As you can see from the pictures, each of those workers have different posture, different positions while lifting. One is sitting and the other two are lifting. Improper lifting and handling. These are all physical hazards, as regards to ergonomics. Environmental ergonomic hazards includes poor lighting, poor ventilation. When there is no proper ventilation, cross ventilation of a building, of an office, a stuffy office, stuffy environment. Poor temperature control when there is excessive heat in an environment, and then poor humidity control. These are environmental hazards. Then psychosocial hazard, that work rest cycle. There is no adequate rest for workers. There is violence, discrimination, bullying in the work site. These are what ergonomic hazards as regards to relationship of workers between the top management and those below. Extraneous stress, carrying out activities that are strenuous without adequate rest. Uneven workload, excessive work given to one worker, just to meet targets. Lack of personal space, there is no sufficient space in the office or no office space. So one small office room is used to accommodate so many workers more than necessary. Poor staff interrelationship. There is no proper communication, no proper relationship between workers. There is no organizational structure, that defines how people need to, the reporting system of the organization is poor. These are all ergonomic issues. And lest I forget, it is also very important that I mention this. For example, when you talk about ergonomics, we talked about sitting posture. That is also an ergonomic issue. By standard, ergonomic standard, it is required that every office chair, the back of the chair should be able to support the lower half, and the upper half of the body. That is to ensure that the entire spinal cord is resting on a cushion, resting on the chair. So let's look at hazard control hierarchy. Hierarchies of hazard control. Number one is elimination. We can use elimination to control hazards. How do you do that? A typical example of an elimination is where you are using a tool that is damaged, a defective tool, and is still used on site. Elimination comes to play when you totally remove that equipment or that tool from being used in the work site and bring in a new one to change that particular one in the work site, and then discarding the one that is defective or taking it out of sight. That is elimination. Substitution, is another hierarchy of hazard control. In terms of substitution, not that the equipment or the tool is not good, but based on level of risk. You see that one of the equipments or one of the tools has a higher risk compared to another one that can still do the job. Where I gave you an example of composite goods in economics. That is simple substitution, where you remove the one of higher risk and bring in the one of lower risk to carry out the same activity. That is simple substitution. It's different from elimination. In the case of elimination, the material or the tool that is either defective or of high risk is totally removed from site and is no longer in use. But in the case of substitution, you bring in a tool or an equipment of lower risk to carry out that particular job. But the other one is also still on site to carry out certain jobs that it is meant for. That is substitution. Engineering control It's where you apply the principles of engineering by way of fabricating the equipment parts that to cover up, to cover for rotating parts, to cover rotating parts. That is engineering control. Or for example, if you go to radio rooms, there is now a situation where a system where there is the use of installation of acoustic, materials to be able to reduce sound level in offices, also in radio rooms, in newsrooms, production rooms. These are all engineering controls. Or for example, today our acoustic doors that are being used everywhere, that is also an engineering control to be able to reduce the amount of noise that is generated. Also, we now have what we call the muffler systems in generators and generating sets. That is also an engineering control where it is installed to reduce the sound that is being generated. Then administrative control is another hierarchy of hazard control. We can use that administrative principles, administrative policies, administrative programs to be able to checkmate the level of hazards that is being exhibited or demonstrated on site. When we talk about administrative control, there are a lot of administrative control. A very good example of administrative control is the use of PPE policy. PPE policy is an administrative control. We also have other administrative controls like no PPE, no work, like restricted work areas. We also have pedestrian walkways, in marked pedestrian walkways. Training and retraining is also an administrative control. Ad hoc, personnel induction before a worker is engaged to carry out any activity in the work site is also an administrative control. Personnel screening and interview at the point of selection is also an administrative control. What we call the medical fitness test, routine medical examination and screening is also an administrative control. These are all measures put in place administratively to ensure that the work site is safe, and anybody who has been engaged or who is to be engaged, goes through those processes at the initial stage to ensure that there is proper control of hazards. Also, we have PPE, which is referred to as the last line of defense. When the other four hierarchies of hazard control fails, then PPE now comes to play. In other words, PPE is not to be considered first in the control of hazards in any work site. PPE comes, is the last line of defense, is the last option that you have in terms of hazard control. So take note of that PPEs are not to be considered at the beginning, but they are to be considered as the last option in the process of controlling hazard. We also talked about risk. We say a risk is a possibility of danger or harm. Mathematically, we express risk to be the product of probability and severity. And I talked about probability as being the chance or the likelihood of an incident happening, the likelihood of an hazard being released, and then severity has to do with the consequence or the level of damage it will cause when that particular hazard is released with its accompanying risk factor. Then we also talk about the consequences and risk assessment matrix. That for you to assess a risk, there is a matrix, that's a template that can help you to assess every risk. Risk are assessed based on 3 levels. You can either assess a risk to be low risk, it can be medium risk, or it can be high risk. Whichever one whichever way you assess the level of risk is simply the material that helps you to assess the level of risk. It's the risk assessment matrix, what we also refer to as RAM. And I actually explain how you can be able to assess a risk to either be low, medium, or high. If you look at the risk assessment matrix, there are basically, what you are seeing here, there are 2 types of risk assessment matrix. We have risk assessment matrix for audits. What is displayed on the screen is a typical example of risk assessment matrix for audits. In the case of an audit, there are 4 different colors, that you'll find on the risk assessment matrix. You have the light blue, you have the deep blue, you have yellow, and you have red. Now, in terms of, that is just for, the purpose of audit. But when you are doing a real site risk assessment, this light blue is not, included. So what you find in a risk assessment matrix is just the deep blue, the deep blue, the yellow, and the red. And this deep blue indicates low risk. This yellow or amber indicates medium risk, and then the red indicates high risk, as we have said earlier before. Why is safety required? Safety is required for different reasons. For example, for moral arguments, it's an obligation to the employer to ensure, as a matter of duty of care, that all employees are free from fatalities and free from disabilities. For social argument, there should be no loss to society, and in order to reduce the suffering of workers. Also, for legal arguments, the labor laws like the Factory Act, like the Workmen Compensation Act, and all of those acts are being put in place. The Occupational Health and Safety Administration Act, all of those are put in place to ensure that workers' rights are protected and are respected. Then for financial argument, no company wants to incur extra costs. So they are in business to make profit and not to record their losses. So for that reason, no company wants to work in an environment where there is constant accident, and that's the reason why the safety officers are being employed. And that brings us to incidents. What then is an incident? Since we do not want incidents to happen, what is an incident? An incident can be defined as an unwanted, undesired. It can be defined as an unwanted, undesired, occurrence that may lead to loss of life, damage to equipment, damage to environment, and damage to reputation. I take it again. An incident can be defined as an unwanted, undesired occurrence that may lead to loss of life or injury to personnel, damage to equipment, environment, and reputation. Now, incidents are basically divided into two. We have the no loss type incident, and we have the loss type incident. The no loss type incident is what we refer to as the near miss. An example of the no loss type incident is near miss, while an example of loss type incident is an accident. What is an accident? An accident is a type of incident that is unplanned, unwanted, and undesired, which may lead or which leads to injury to personnel, damage to assets, environment, and reputation. Any unwanted, unplanned, and undesired incident that leads to loss of life or injury to personnel, damage to assets, environment, and reputation is referred to as what? Accident. So take note. Someone asked the other day, what's the difference between accident and incident? The accident and incident, a accident is an example, is a type of incident. It therefore means that all accidents are incidents, but not all incidents are accidents. Take note. All accidents are incidents, but not all incidents are accidents. The reason being that anytime an accident occurs, that is a recorded incident, it's a type of incident. But there are some incidents that may not lead to loss of life or injury to personnel or damage to assets, environment, and reputation. But they have the same potential as the accident, such occurrences that did not lead to a loss of life or damage to equipment, assets, reputation, and environment, but have all the potential to cause sin, are referred to as near misses. So, all accidents are incidents, but not all incidents are accidents. So, examples of accidents like facility or injury, ill health, property damage, environmental damage, process disruption, that is disruption of productivity or lost time or downtime. Then disturbance, facility unrest, and all of that. They are all accidents. While a near miss is an unplanned event that did not result